"Sir, my mama said this key would find you." The little girl's voice was so small that, for half a second, William Hawthorne thought he had imagined it beneath the crystal clink of champagne glasses and the soft swell of piano music drifting through the grand ballroom of the Whitmore Hotel. Then he looked down. Standing in front of him, no taller than the silver donation table beside her, was a black girl in a faded navy dress, her hair braided into two careful rows tied with white ribbons that had clearly been washed and reused many times. In both hands, she held out an old brass key, darkened by age, its teeth uneven, its round head shaped like a tiny hawthorn flower. Around them, the annual Hawthorne Foundation Gala glittered like a painting of wealth. Marble floors polished bright enough to reflect the chandeliers, waiters moving silently with trays of sparkling water, donors in tuxedos and silk gowns murmuring about scholarships, hospitals, legacy. William had spent the past hour shaking hands, smiling for photographs, and listening to people praise his generosity as if generosity were something that could be measured in press releases. But the moment that key touched his palm, every sound in the room seemed to slip backward, as though someone had lowered the volume on the entire world. The metal was cold. Too cold. He stared at it, and his breath caught in a way no boardroom crisis, no hostile takeover, no collapsing stock price had ever managed to do. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice low. The girl did not step back. She only lifted her chin, trying to look brave, though her fingers twisted together after the key left them. "My mama kept it in a little blue box," she said. "She told me if anything ever happened to her, I should bring it to the man with the hawthorn flower on his building." William's eyes moved, almost against his will, toward the enormous gold emblem behind the stage. The same flower, carved into the foundation seal, shining above a banner that read a future for every child. His assistant, Daniel Price, appeared quickly at his side, wearing the careful expression of a man trained to make problems disappear before they became visible. "Mr. Hawthorne," Daniel murmured, "security can help the child find her guardian." The girl heard him. Her shoulders stiffened, but she did not cry. That was what struck William first. Not her dress, not the worn shoes, not the way the guests were beginning to glance over with curiosity sharpened by judgment. It was the fact that she stood there with the solemn courage of someone who had rehearsed this moment in her mind 100 times and had decided she would not leave until the truth was delivered. "What's your name?" William asked. "Nia Brooks," she said. The last name passed through him without impact. The first name stayed. Nia. Soft, bright, unfamiliar. "And your mother?" The girl swallowed. For the first time, her eyes dropped to the floor. "Grace Brooks." The key nearly slipped from William's fingers. Grace. The name did not enter him like a memory. It arrived like weather, sudden and unavoidable, filling his chest with the scent of rain on Charleston pavement, the warmth of a summer porch light, the sound of a young woman laughing beside an open window while a radio played low in the background. Grace Brooks had been 22 when he last saw her. She had worn a yellow scarf in her hair and told him rich people were always in a hurry because they were afraid silence would tell them the truth. He had loved her with the reckless certainty of a man too young to understand how easily families could turn love into a locked room. Then she was gone. No goodbye that made sense. No letter. No phone call returned. His father had called it a blessing. His brother had called it reality. William had buried it beneath 30 years of ambition and told himself some doors were meant to stay closed. "That's not possible," he whispered. Nia looked up at him then, and the ballroom lights caught her eyes. They were dark brown, steady, and achingly familiar. Not Grace's exactly, but close enough to make the past lean forward. "Mama said you might say that," she replied. Daniel shifted uneasily. "Sir, the mayor is waiting near the stage. The scholarship announcement begins in 3 minutes." William barely heard him. Across the room, Senator Marlowe laughed too, loudly beside a cluster of donors. Cameras flashed near the step-and-repeat wall. A violinist adjusted his sheet music. Life continued with the insulting confidence of people who had no idea that the ground beneath William Hawthorne had just cracked open. "How old are you, Nia?" he asked. 8, she said. "Almost 9 in October." 8. The number moved through him slowly, rearranging things he did not want rearranged. Grace had disappeared 9 years ago from the edges of his life, or so he had believed. He closed his hand around the key until the old metal pressed into his skin. Who brought you here? The bus, Nia said simply. From East Baltimore. Then I walked the last 2 blocks because the driver said this hotel was where fancy people go when they want the whole city to see them being nice. A few nearby guests went still, caught between offense and embarrassment. William would have smiled at the honesty if his heart had not been beating so hard. Does anyone know you're here? Mrs. Carter knows, Nia said. At that name, William looked sharply at her. Evelyn Carter? Nia nodded. She was my mama's friend. She said she used to work in your old house. She said the key was real. The key. The old house. Evelyn Carter. Grace Brooks. Each word was a match struck in a dark hallway. William turned the key over in his hand and saw, beneath the tarnish, 3 tiny engraved letters on the stem. WHM William Hawthorne Manor. A house he had not entered in years. A house his family had quietly closed after his father died. A house with 1 basement door that had never opened for anyone after the summer grace vanished. Daniel leaned closer. Mr. Hawthorne, this may be a setup. We should handle this privately. No, William said. The word came out calm, but something in it made Daniel stop. William knelt slowly, so he was eye level with Nia, and the movement sent a ripple through the nearby crowd. Billionaires did not kneel in gala photographs. They stood at podiums. They accepted applause. They did not bend down in front of little girls holding pieces of their forgotten past. Nia, he said carefully, what exactly did your mother tell you this key opens? Nia reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out a folded piece of paper, soft from being opened too many times. She did not hand it over yet. She held it against her chest, as if it were the last safe thing she owned. She said it opens the room where they hid the truth, she whispered. William felt the chandeliers blur above him. Behind him, someone called his name from the stage. The microphone gave a brief, hollow squeal. The gala waited. The donors waited. The city waited for William Hawthorne to walk beneath the lights and speak about helping children he had never met. But in front of him stood Nia Brooks, 8 years old, brave enough to cross Baltimore with a key older than she was, and a name he had spent years trying not to remember. William rose slowly, still holding the key. Cancel the speech, he said. Daniel blinked. Sir. William's gaze remained on Nia. Bring the car around. The girl's face tightened with uncertainty. Are you mad? She asked. William looked down at the key in his hand, then back at the child whose voice had unlocked more than any door. No, he said softly. I think I'm finally listening. The city lights stretched across the windshield like rivers of gold as the black sedan moved through downtown Baltimore. William sat in the back seat beside Nia, the old brass key resting heavily in his palm. Neither of them spoke for the first few minutes. Outside, traffic drifted past in quiet streams while inside the car the silence felt larger than the streets themselves. Daniel occupied the front passenger seat, checking messages that seemed increasingly urgent, but even he had stopped trying to convince William to return to the gala. Every few seconds William found himself glancing at the little girl beside him. Nia sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap. She was not staring at the city. She was staring at the folded note still clutched between her fingers. It looked worn enough to have been opened hundreds of times. Finally William spoke. How long have you had that letter? Nia looked down at it. Since last winter. And you never opened it? She shook her head. Mama told me it was not for me. The answer landed softly. But something about it unsettled him. Most children would have unfolded the paper the moment curiosity appeared. Nia had carried it for months without reading it simply because her mother had asked her to. That kind of trust felt rare. What happened to your mother? William asked carefully. Nia stared out the window before answering. She got sick. Her voice remained steady. She tried to keep working anyway. She said people still needed help even when she was tired. William felt his chest tighten. That sounded exactly like Grace. Even years ago, she had been the kind of person who would stay late helping strangers while forgetting to eat dinner herself. When did she pass away? Nia lowered her eyes. 3 months ago. The car seemed to grow quieter. William looked away toward the passing lights. 3 months. Somewhere in America, Grace Brooks had left this world 3 months ago, and he had known nothing about it. Not because he had stopped caring. Not because he had forgotten her. Because somehow life had placed entire oceans between the truth and the people who needed it. Daniel glanced back from the front seat. Sir, perhaps we should proceed cautiously. We do not know what is waiting at the manor. William almost laughed. The manor. Even hearing the words felt strange. Hawthorne Manor had once been the center of his family's world, a sprawling estate sitting nearly 30 acres outside the city. After his father died, the house had been sealed except for occasional maintenance visits. No holidays, no gatherings, no family dinners, just empty rooms collecting dust and memories. I know exactly what is waiting there, William said quietly. Questions? Nia looked at him for the first time since entering the car. Do you remember my mama? The question arrived without warning. William stared at the key. Yes. Was she nice? A faint smile touched his face. She was the kindest person I knew. Nia nodded slowly as though she had expected that answer. That is what everybody says. Everybody. Mrs. Carter. My church teacher. The lady at the library. Her expression softened. Mama used to read stories to little kids there every Saturday. William swallowed hard. He could almost see Grace doing exactly that, sitting cross-legged beside a shelf while children gathered around her. The image felt so vivid it hurt. Did she ever talk about me? Nia hesitated. Not much. The answer surprised him more than it should have. Not much. She said some people stay in your heart even when they are far away. Nia looked down again. She said you were one of those people. For several seconds William could not find words. The highway sign slipped past overhead. Somewhere beyond the city limits darkness spread across fields and old roads leading toward the estate. At last the car turned onto a narrow tree-lined route. The streetlights became fewer. The night grew deeper. 20 minutes later the gates appeared. Massive wrought iron arches standing beneath ancient oak trees. Hawthorne Manor. Daniel pressed a button and the gates slowly opened with a low mechanical hum. Nia leaned forward to look through the windshield. The estate emerged from the darkness piece by piece. Tall white columns. Long stone walkways. Hundreds of dark windows reflecting moonlight. It looked less like a home and more like a sleeping monument. Wow, Nia whispered. William did not answer. His eyes remained fixed on the house. He had spent years avoiding this place because every hallway carried echoes he could not explain. Yet tonight something felt different. The old fear had been replaced by anticipation. The sedan rolled to a stop beneath the front entrance. Nobody moved immediately. The manor stood silent before them. Then Nia looked at the brass key in William's hand. The room is still here, she said softly. William frowned. What room? Nia slowly lifted the folded note. The room Mama wanted you to find. For the first time all evening, uncertainty crossed William's face. You have not read this letter, he said. No, then how do you know? Nia's fingers tightened around the paper. Because before she died, she told me one thing. William waited. The little girl looked up at the enormous house standing beneath the moonlight. She said the truth is still waiting behind the door. For a long moment nobody spoke. The night air drifted. Through the open driveway carrying the scent of pine trees and old stone. William stood at the foot of the manor steps, staring at the folded letter in Nia's hands. The truth is still waiting behind the door. The words echoed in his mind with unsettling clarity. Finally, he reached for the paper. Nia hesitated only a second before placing it carefully into his palm. The envelope was yellowed with age. Across the front, written in graceful blue ink, were 3 words that stopped his heart. For William, the handwriting was unmistakable. Grace. He had not seen those looping letters in nearly a decade. His fingers trembled slightly as he traced the ink. Daniel noticed it immediately. In all the years he had worked beside William Hawthorne, he had never seen the billionaire shaken by anything. Not lawsuits, not financial disasters, not public scandals. Yet a single envelope had done what none of those things could accomplish. William slowly opened the letter. The paper crackled softly in the quiet darkness. He began to read. If you are holding this letter, it means Nia found you. If she did, then she was brave enough to do something I never could. William stopped. He closed his eyes for a moment before continuing. I do not know what you have been told over the years. I only know that the truth never reached you. I tried, more times than I can count, but every letter disappeared. Every phone call ended before it began. Eventually, I stopped fighting because I thought you had chosen your world and left mine behind. Nia watched him silently. The moonlight reflected in her eyes. William swallowed hard and continued reading. There is something hidden inside the manor. Something that belongs to both of us. I left it where no one would think to look. The key will show you the way. When you find it, you will finally understand why I could never come back. William lowered the page. His chest felt tight. That is all, Daniel asked quietly. William flipped the letter over. Nothing else. No explanation. No answers. Only more questions. Nia pointed toward the massive house. She always said the key was more important than the letter. William looked up at the manor. Hundreds of windows stared back at him like silent eyes. Somewhere inside that enormous structure waited the secret Grace had protected all these years. We are going in, he said. The front doors opened with a low groan. Dust lingered in the air beyond the entrance hall. Chandeliers hung motionless above marble floors. Furniture remained covered in white sheets exactly as it had been left years earlier. Time seemed frozen inside the manor. Nia stepped carefully beside William as they moved deeper into the house. Her small shoes echoed softly against the floor. It feels like a museum, she whispered. William almost smiled. Sometimes I think it became one. They passed portraits of generations of Hawthornes lining the walls. Men in suits. Women in elegant dresses. Faces painted with confidence and certainty. Nia studied them as they walked. Do they all live here? She asked. No. William glanced toward the paintings. Most of them are gone. Then why keep their pictures? The question caught him off guard. He looked at the portraits again. Maybe because people are afraid of forgetting. Nia nodded thoughtfully. Mama said forgetting is different from letting go. William looked at her. Another sentence that sounded exactly like Grace. They reached the grand staircase. For a moment, William stood still. A memory surfaced unexpectedly. Grace standing right there at the bottom of those steps laughing because she had gotten lost during a charity event. He had offered to show her the library. Instead, they had spent 2 hours talking about books and music and dreams neither of them had achieved yet. The memory faded as quickly as it came. Do you know where the door is? Daniel asked. William shook his head. Not yet. Then Nia pointed toward the east wing. Maybe there. Both men turned toward her. Why there? Daniel asked. Nia shrugged. I do not know. She looked embarrassed. It just feels right. William stared at her for a second. Then he followed her gaze. The east wing. The oldest section of the manor. The part of the house his father had always kept locked. A strange chill moved through him. Without another word, he started walking. Nia hurried beside him. The hallways grew narrower as they moved deeper into the estate. Dust covered the windows. Moonlight spilled across the floor in pale, silver rectangles. Finally, they reached a dead end. At first glance, there was nothing unusual about it. Just wood paneling and an antique bookshelf. Daniel frowned. This cannot be right. But Nia stepped forward slowly. Her eyes fixed on something hidden between the shelves. There, she whispered. William moved closer. Behind the books, nearly invisible beneath years of dust, sat a small brass lock shaped exactly like the flower engraved on the old key. William stared at the brass lock hidden behind the bookshelf. For several seconds, nobody moved. Dust floated through the narrow beam of moonlight spilling from a nearby window, and the entire hallway seemed to hold its breath. The old key felt heavier in his hand now, not because of its weight, but because of what it represented. 9 years of questions. 9 years of silence. 9 years of believing a chapter of his life had ended when perhaps it had never truly closed. Nia stood beside him, her eyes fixed on the lock. She did not appear frightened. If anything, she looked curious, like a child standing before the final page of a mystery she had waited her whole life to understand. Daniel stepped forward and examined the brass plate surrounding the lock. This mechanism looks original, he said quietly. It could have been here for decades. William nodded slowly. This section of the manor was built before I was born. His voice sounded distant even to himself. He lifted the key. The engraved flower on its handle matched the symbol on the lock perfectly. There was no doubt anymore. Grace had known exactly where this door was. The realization sent a chill through him. She had known something about this house that even he had forgotten. Carefully, he inserted the key. The metal slid into place with surprising ease. For a moment, nothing happened. Then came a soft click. The sound echoed through the hallway like a whispered answer. Nia's eyes widened. Daniel looked toward William. Are you ready? William did not answer immediately. Instead, he rested one hand against the bookshelf. The polished wood felt cool beneath his fingers. Memories flickered through his mind. Family dinners. Holiday gatherings. Conversations cut short whenever certain topics appeared. Questions that had never received answers. Suddenly, he wondered how many secrets had been hidden inside this house long before Grace entered his life. Taking a slow breath, He turned the key. Deep within the wall, gears shifted. A low mechanical rumble followed. Dust drifted from the ceiling as the entire bookshelf began moving inward. Nia gasped softly. Behind it appeared a narrow wooden door. Smaller than expected. Plain. Almost disappointingly ordinary after years of mystery. Yet something about it felt important. William stared at it in silence. The door had no handle on the outside. No markings. No decoration. Just old wood worn smooth by time. "This is it," Nia whispered. Daniel pulled out his phone flashlight. "Let me check inside first." But before he could move, William placed a hand on his arm. "No," Daniel frowned. "Sir." William kept his eyes on the door. "If Grace wanted me to find this, then I am opening it." The billionaire reached forward and pushed gently. The door swung inward with a long creak. A stale breath of air drifted into the hallway. Not unpleasant. Just old. Forgotten. Beyond the doorway waited a small room. Much smaller than anyone expected. Perhaps 12 feet by 12 feet. No hidden vault. No treasure. No dramatic discovery. Just a quiet room frozen in time. Nia stepped inside first. Her shoes stirred dust across the wooden floorboards. William followed slowly. Daniel remained near the doorway, sweeping his flashlight across the room. Along one wall stood a narrow desk. Against another sat a wooden rocking chair. Shelves lined the far side of the room. Hundreds of items covered them. Books, journals, small boxes, framed photographs. Everything preserved carefully beneath years of dust. Nia moved toward the photographs. "That is Mama," she said immediately. William turned. His breath caught. Grace smiled from a picture frame resting near the center shelf. She looked younger than he remembered. Sunlight illuminated her face. Her hair moved in the wind. The photograph seemed alive somehow. William walked closer. Beside it sat another frame. Then another. And another. Every single one contained Grace. Different years. Different places. Different moments. Some showed her reading. Others showed her standing beside children. One captured her laughing while holding a birthday cake. William stared in disbelief. Why would she keep all of these here? Daniel asked quietly. Nia pointed toward the desk. Maybe the answer is there. They approached together. On top of the desk rested a leather journal tied with a blue ribbon. Beneath it sat dozens of sealed envelopes stacked neatly into rows. William picked one up. His name was written across the front. Then another. And another. Every envelope carried the same inscription. For William Hawthorne. His pulse quickened. There were dozens of letters. Perhaps hundreds. Years of letters. Years of words that had never reached him. Nia watched his expression carefully. "She wrote to you?" William nodded slowly. He could barely speak. Apparently she never stopped. The room fell silent. Daniel carefully lifted one envelope and examined the postmark. His face changed immediately. "Sir." William looked up. "What is it?" Daniel handed him the envelope. William read the date. Then another. Then another. His stomach tightened. The letters were addressed correctly. They had been stamped correctly. They should have been delivered. Every single one should have reached him years ago. Yet none ever had. Nia noticed the change in his face. What happened? William stared at the mountain of unopened letters covering the desk. A terrible realization began forming in his mind. Grace had not abandoned him. She had not disappeared. She had not chosen silence. Someone had made sure these letters never arrived. Someone had hidden them. Someone had wanted the truth buried inside this room. And suddenly the mystery was no longer about what Grace had left behind. It was about who had worked so hard to keep it hidden. The discovery settled over the room like a storm cloud that nobody could ignore. William stood motionless beside the desk, one hand resting on a stack of unopened letters while the other held an envelope dated nearly 8 years earlier. Every piece of evidence pointed toward the same impossible conclusion. Grace had written to him again and again. She had never disappeared. She had never walked away. Someone had intercepted her words before they could reach him. Nia watched him quietly from across the room. Children often asked questions when adults became emotional. Nia did not. She simply waited. It was one more thing that reminded him of Grace. Daniel carefully examined the shelves surrounding them. "There is more here," he said. His flashlight moved across several storage boxes arranged beneath the photographs. Each one was labeled in neat handwriting. School, medical, housing, journal. William immediately noticed the final box. Journal. He reached for it and lifted the lid. Inside sat more than a dozen notebooks bound in blue leather. The earliest entry appeared to be nearly 9 years old. The most recent was dated only 4 months before Grace passed away. Nia stepped closer. Mama wrote in those every night. William looked at her. You knew about these? She nodded. She called them her memory books. The billionaire slowly opened the first journal. The paper had yellowed with age, but the handwriting remained clear. He scanned the first page, then the second, then the third. His breathing gradually slowed as he became absorbed in Grace's words. She had documented everything. Her hopes, her fears, her struggles, her dreams for the future. Most surprising of all, his name appeared repeatedly throughout the entries. Not with bitterness, not with anger, but with sadness. Grace had believed he never received her messages. She had assumed he chose not to answer. Yet despite that belief, she continued writing about him with kindness. William closed the journal for a moment. The realization hurt more than he expected. Nia tilted her head. What does it say? He looked at her carefully. It says your mother never stopped believing people could be better than their mistakes. Nia smiled softly. That sounds like her. Daniel suddenly knelt beside another box near the floor. Sir. William turned. Daniel lifted a thin folder from the container. Across the front appeared an old law firm's logo. The date printed beneath it was 9 years old. William took the folder immediately. His pulse quickened. Inside were copies of correspondence, property records, and several certified mail receipts. Daniel frowned as he reviewed the documents beside him. This is strange. What is? William asked. Daniel pointed to a series of signatures. These delivery confirmations show multiple letters arriving at Hawthorne Manor. William stared at the papers. Every receipt carried the same destination. Every receipt confirmed successful delivery. Yet he had never seen any of them. Who signed for them? Daniel flipped through the pages. Then his expression changed. Caroline Pierce. Silence filled the room. Nia looked between the two men. Who is Caroline? William stared at the signature. Caroline Pierce. His older sister-in-law. The person who had managed many family affairs after his father's death. The person he trusted with access to properties, records, and correspondence during some of the busiest years of his career. A cold feeling settled into his chest. She is family, he said quietly. Nia noticed something in his voice. You do not sound happy about that. William almost laughed despite everything. Children had a way of seeing straight through carefully constructed answers. Before he could respond, another discovery caught Daniel's attention. Hidden beneath the folder sat a small cassette tape protected inside a plastic case. A handwritten label covered the front. For William. If he ever finds the room. Nobody spoke. The tape seemed almost unreal sitting there among the journals and photographs. William picked it up carefully. His fingers trembled slightly. There is a tape player on the shelf, Nia said. Both men looked at her. She pointed toward the corner of the room. Sure enough, an old cassette recorder rested beside the rocking chair. Dust covered its surface, but it appeared intact. William carried the tape toward it slowly. Every step felt heavier than the last. Behind him, the room remained silent except for the faint ticking of an antique clock mounted above the bookshelf. The sound seemed louder now, more urgent, as though time itself had been waiting for this moment. He inserted the cassette. The machine clicked softly. For several seconds nothing happened. Then a faint hiss emerged from the speaker. Nia moved closer. Daniel folded his arms. William stared at the recorder. Suddenly a familiar voice filled the room. Gentle, warm, unmistakable. Grace, if you are hearing this, she said softly, then you finally found the room. And if you found the room, then the truth survived longer than the lies. Grace's voice filled the small room with a warmth that seemed impossible after so many years. Even through the faint static of the old recorder, every word sounded alive. William, if you are hearing this, then I need you to know something before anything else. I never stopped writing. I never stopped hoping. And I never stopped believing that one day the truth would find its way home. The tape hissed softly. William stood frozen beside the recorder. Across the room, Nia listened carefully, her eyes fixed on the machine as though she could somehow see her mother standing there. For a long time, Grace continued, I thought you chose silence. I thought your success had carried you somewhere I could not follow. But deep down, I never believed that completely. The William the First knew would never ignore a person he cared about. Especially not when they needed him. William lowered his head. Every sentence felt like a hand reaching across time. I am recording this because I finally understand what happened. The letters never reached you. The calls never reached you. Someone made sure of that. Daniel exchanged a glance with William. Neither man spoke. The answer they feared was beginning to take shape. Grace continued. I do not know why they were so determined to keep us apart. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was fear. Maybe they believed they were protecting the Hawthorne name. But names are not people. Money is not family. And secrets never stay buried forever. Nia slowly stepped closer to William. Without thinking, he rested a hand gently on her shoulder. The gesture felt natural, surprising both of them. The tape rolled on. If Nia is with you, then she is old enough to hear this. Sweetheart, if you are listening, I need you to know that none of this was your fault. You were loved every single day of your life. You were wanted every single day of your life. And no matter what happens after this recording ends, never let anyone convince you otherwise. Nia blinked rapidly. She smiled, but tears gathered in her eyes. That sounds like her, she whispered. William could not answer. His throat felt too tight. Grace's voice softened. There is one more thing you need to find. It is not in this room. I left it somewhere safer. Inside the blue storage chest beneath the East Tower staircase, you will find a folder. Everything is there. The documents. The records. The proof. A pause followed. Then came the sentence that changed everything. And if the truth is ever questioned, there is one document that will answer it forever. William straightened immediately. Daniel did the same. 9 years ago, before Nia was born, I requested a private legal paternity record. I never intended to use it. I only wanted her to have answers someday. Silence filled the room. Even the old recorder seemed to pause. Then Grace said the words neither of them expected to hear so directly. William, Nia is your daughter. The room went completely still. No one moved. No one spoke. The only sound came from the quiet turning of the cassette tape. William stared at the recorder as though the world had shifted beneath his feet. Across from him, Nia looked equally stunned. She had carried questions her entire life, but hearing the answers spoken aloud by her mother's own voice felt different. Real. Permanent. Grace continued gently. If you are hearing this together, then fate has already done the hardest part. The rest belongs to both of you. William slowly lowered himself into the rocking chair. For years he had built companies, managed billions of dollars, and solved problems that seemed impossible. Yet nothing in his life had prepared him for this moment. Nia remained standing beside him. After several seconds, she looked down at him carefully. Is it true? She asked softly. William looked up at her. The same dark eyes. The same quiet. Courage. The same stubborn determination he remembered in Grace. Suddenly he saw things he had missed before. Not because they were hidden, but because he had never known to look. I do not know yet, he said honestly. But I think your mother believed it was. Nia nodded. She seemed calmer than he expected. Children often handled truth differently than adults. They accepted it before fear had time to complicate it. The recorder crackled one final time. If you made it this far, Grace said with a faint laugh, then you are probably both standing there looking shocked. That would be very like you, William. For the first time all night, a small smile touched his face. Grace's voice grew softer. Go find the folder. It will explain everything. Then the tape ended. The machine clicked. Silence returned. Outside, the wind brushed gently against the manor windows. William rose slowly from the chair. Daniel looked toward him. The East Tower staircase, he said. William nodded. Then he looked at Nia. She was still holding the old brass key. Not tightly anymore. Just carefully. As though it had finally completed the journey it was meant to make. Together, without another word, they turned toward the doorway and started walking deeper into the sleeping manor, toward the final piece of the truth waiting in the dark. The East Tower sat at the far end of the manor where the hallways narrowed and the ceilings lowered. It was one of the oldest sections of the estate, built long before William was born. The lights no longer worked there, leaving only moonlight to guide them through the shadows. Their footsteps echoed softly across the wooden floors as they followed the directions from Grace's recording. Nia walked beside William, still carrying the brass key. Neither of them spoke much. The truth they had just heard felt too large for ordinary conversation. At the base of the tower staircase, they found an antique storage chest tucked beneath the first landing. Dust covered every inch of it. The brass latch had turned green with age. Daniel knelt and carefully opened it. The lid creaked upward. Inside sat a single blue folder exactly where Grace said it would be. William, stared at it for several seconds before reaching down. Somehow the folder felt heavier than the box of letters, heavier than the journals, heavier even than the key. Because this was not memory. This was proof. Slowly he opened it. The first documents were legal filings. The second group contained correspondence records. The third held certified mail receipts matching the ones they had already discovered. Then William found a sealed envelope marked legal verification. His pulse quickened. Daniel leaned closer. That must be it. William carefully opened the seal. Inside rested several official documents and a notarized statement. At the very top sat a laboratory report dated nearly 9 years earlier. The page identified Grace Brooks. Beneath her name appeared another. William Hawthorne. For a moment the words blurred. He read the report again. Then a third time. The result remained unchanged. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. The silence that followed seemed endless. Nia watched his expression carefully. What does it say? She asked softly. William lowered the paper. He looked at the little girl standing beneath the staircase. Her worn dress. Her careful braids. Her steady eyes. Suddenly, every strange feeling from the evening made sense. The familiarity. The connection. The instinct to protect her. None of it had appeared out of nowhere. It says your mother was telling the truth, he said quietly. Nia stared at him. About what? William swallowed. His voice almost disappeared when he answered. About me being your father. The words hung in the air between them. Nia blinked several times. Not because she was surprised. Almost because she was trying to understand what changed now that the possibility had become real. So you are my dad? She asked. William nodded slowly. Yes. Nia looked down at the brass key in her hands. Then she looked back up. Okay. Daniel stared at her. Okay. Nia shrugged gently. Mama always seemed pretty sure. For the first time that night, William laughed. It was not a loud laugh. Just a quiet burst of disbelief and relief mixed together. Grace would have loved that answer. The moment lasted only a few seconds before. Daniel reached for another document inside the folder. His expression changed immediately. Sir. William took the page. The smile vanished from his face. This document was different. It contained copies of private correspondence between Grace and a family representative. Several names appeared throughout the letters. One name appeared more than any other. Caroline Pierce. William's stomach tightened. Every page painted the same picture. Grace repeatedly requested contact. Caroline repeatedly denied access. Grace submitted letters. Caroline signed for them. Grace attempted communication. Caroline intercepted it. The pattern stretched across years. She knew, William whispered. Daniel nodded grimly. Not only did she know. According to these records, she actively prevented the information from reaching you. William stared at the pages. His mind struggled to process it. Caroline had attended family dinners, charity events, business celebrations. She had smiled at him, advised him, managed family affairs, all while hiding the existence of his daughter. Nia noticed the shift immediately. Something is wrong. William lowered the folder. Someone made a terrible choice a long time ago. Nia considered that answer carefully. Can they fix it? The question struck him harder than any accusation could have. Because children viewed problems differently. Adults focused on blame. Children focused on solutions. William looked around the old tower staircase. The manor no longer felt like a monument to loss. It felt like the beginning of something else. I do not know, he admitted. But I am going to try. Nia smiled faintly. Then she did something unexpected. She slipped her small hand into his. The gesture was simple, natural, trusting. William looked down at their joined hands and felt something shift inside him. For years he had believed success meant building companies, acquiring properties, expanding influence. Yet standing there beneath the staircase, holding the hand of the daughter he never knew existed, he realized how little any of those victories mattered compared to this moment. Outside, the first hint of dawn began to brighten the distant windows of the manor. The long night was finally ending. But for William Hawthorne and Nia Brooks, everything was only beginning. The sunrise painted the manor windows with soft shades of gold, but the warmth of morning did little to ease the weight of what had been discovered during the night. William had not slept. Neither had Daniel. After gathering every letter, journal, document, and recording from the hidden room, they moved everything into the manor library where a fire crackled quietly in the stone fireplace. Nia sat curled into an oversized leather chair with a blanket draped across her shoulders. For the first time since arriving, she looked tired. The long journey, the revelations, and the emotions of the night were finally catching up to her. Yet every time William glanced in her direction, he felt something unfamiliar. Not responsibility, not obligation, something deeper, something that had been waiting for years without either of them knowing it. The library door opened softly. An elderly woman stepped inside carrying a tray with hot chocolate and breakfast pastries. The moment Nia saw her, she jumped from the chair. "Mrs. Carter," she exclaimed. Evelyn Carter smiled warmly and opened her arms. Nia hurried across the room and embraced her. William watched silently. The woman looked older than he remembered. Her hair was silver now. Fine lines framed her eyes. Yet her expression remained exactly the same. Kind, steady, honest. After greeting Nia, Evelyn turned toward William. For several seconds neither spoke. Then she quietly said, "I always hoped this day would come." William stared at her. "You knew?" She nodded. "Yes." "How long?" "Almost 9 years." Daniel looked away. The answer was painful even for him. William took a slow breath. "Then why did nobody tell me?" Evelyn's eyes filled with sadness. "Because every time Grace tried, someone stood in the way." Silence settled over the room. Evelyn moved toward the table and carefully placed down the tray. "Your father was gone by then. Most of the decisions were being handled by others." She paused, and Caroline was very determined. William looked toward the stack of documents waiting beside him. Determined? To do what? Evelyn lowered her eyes. Protect the family image. The words sounded hollow even as she spoke them. Nia frowned from across the room. Protect it from what? Evelyn knelt beside her. From change. Nia considered the answer. That sounds silly. A faint smile appeared on Evelyn's face. Sometimes adults make very complicated mistakes. William turned toward the window. Beyond the glass, sunlight spread across the estate grounds. Somewhere outside, birds moved through the trees. The world continued as though nothing had changed. Yet everything had changed. Caroline knew Grace was carrying my child, he said quietly. Evelyn nodded. Yes. She intercepted every letter. Another nod. Yes. William closed his eyes briefly, and she watched 9 years pass without saying a word. Evelyn said nothing because there was nothing left to say. The documents already told the story. A soft voice interrupted the silence. Are you angry? Nia asked. William looked back at her. The question was simple, but the answer was not. He thought about the hidden room, the unopened letters, the lost years, the childhood moments he had never witnessed. Birthdays, school projects, bedtime stories, entire chapters of a life he should have shared. I think I am sad, he finally answered. Nia nodded slowly. Mama used to say sad people need hugs more than angry people. Before anyone could respond, she crossed the room and wrapped her arms around him. The gesture caught him completely off guard. William froze for a moment. Then he gently returned the hug. Evelyn looked away to hide tears gathering in her eyes. Daniel suddenly found great interest in organizing papers. The room remained quiet. Not uncomfortable quiet. Healing quiet. After a few moments, Nia stepped back. Better? She asked. William laughed softly. A little. Nia smiled. Good. Evelyn cleared her throat gently. There is one more thing Grace asked me to give you if this day ever arrived. She reached into her handbag and removed a small photograph. William accepted it carefully. The image showed Grace sitting on a park bench years ago. She was smiling. Beside her sat a little girl no older than 3, holding a stuffed rabbit. Nia. Across the bottom, written in Grace's familiar handwriting, was a short message. For the day you finally find each other. William stared at the photograph for a long time. Then he looked up at his daughter. His daughter. The words still felt new. Yet they already felt true. Outside, the morning sun continued rising higher above the manor. The night of secrets was over. Ahead waited difficult conversations, painful truths, and people who would have to answer for their choices. But sitting there beside Nia, surrounded by the evidence of what had been lost and what had finally been found, William realized something important. The story was no longer about the years that had been taken from them. It was about what they would do with the years that remained. 3 days later, the grand ballroom of the Hawthorne Foundation was full once again. Crystal chandeliers glowed overhead. Reporters gathered near the back of the room. Business leaders, board members, donors, and community partners filled the seats. Many assumed William Hawthorne had called the special gathering to discuss a new initiative or major investment. Few realized they were about to witness something far more important. Near the front row, Nia sat beside Evelyn Carter wearing a simple blue dress. The old brass key rested inside her pocket. She reached down occasionally to make sure it was still there, not because she needed it anymore, but because it reminded her of her mother. Across the room, William stood alone behind the stage curtain, holding Grace's photograph. The image had barely left his hand since the morning he received it. Daniel approached quietly. "Everyone is ready." William nodded. His gaze drifted toward the audience beyond the curtain. Somewhere among the guests sat Caroline Pierce. She had arrived an hour earlier after receiving an urgent request to attend. Their conversation before the event had been brief and difficult. The documents, letters, and records left little room for denial. In the end, Caroline had offered explanations, regrets, and apologies. None of them could restore the years that had been lost. Yet William understood something now that he had not understood before. The future mattered more than revenge. The truth mattered more than punishment. And Nia deserved a beginning that was not built on bitterness. The ballroom lights dimmed slightly. A hush spread through the crowd. William stepped onto the stage. Applause greeted him automatically. He waited until the room became quiet again. Then he spoke. "Thank you all for coming." His voice echoed gently through the hall. "Most of you expected a business announcement tonight." A few smiles appeared in the audience. William shook his head. "This is not about business." The room immediately grew more attentive. 3 nights ago, a little girl walked into my life carrying an old brass key. He paused. At the time, I thought she was bringing me a mystery. I now understand she was bringing me the truth. Reporters lowered their pens. Donors exchanged confused glances. William continued. That truth led me to a hidden room, hundreds of letters, and a story that should have been told years ago. His eyes moved toward the front row. Nia looked back at him calmly. It also led me to discover that I have a daughter. The ballroom fell completely silent. Nobody moved. Nobody whispered. Even the photographers forgot to raise their cameras. William stepped away from the podium and looked directly at Nia. "Nia Brooks, would you come join me?" Evelyn squeezed the little girl's hand. Nia stood slowly and walked toward the stage. Her shoes clicked softly against the polished floor. When she reached him, William knelt, so they stood eye to eye just as they had on the night they first met. "You crossed an entire city because your mother trusted you with something important," he said. "You carried the truth when nobody else could." Nia smiled. "Mama always said somebody had to." A ripple of gentle laughter moved through the crowd. William smiled too. Then he stood and addressed the audience once more. "Today I am proud to introduce my daughter." Applause began slowly. Then it spread throughout the ballroom until every person in the room was standing. Nia looked surprised by the reaction. William placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. The applause lasted nearly a full minute. When it finally settled, William revealed one final announcement. Beginning today, the hidden room at Hawthorne Manor will become the Grace Brooks Reading House. A large photograph of Grace appeared on the screen behind him. Every child who needs a place to learn, dream, and belong will be welcome there. Tears appeared in Evelyn's eyes. Daniel smiled openly. Even many of the guests seemed moved. William looked down at Nia. "And there will also be a new scholarship fund." Nia tilted her head. "What kind?" "The Grace Brooks Key Scholarship," William answered. "For children brave enough to open doors for others." The audience applauded again. This time Nia joined them. Later that evening, after the guests had departed and the cameras were gone, William and Nia returned to the manor. The sunset painted the grounds in shades of gold and amber. Together they walked back to the hidden room. The shelves remained exactly as they had been. The photographs remained untouched. Grace's presence still seemed to fill the space. Nia removed the brass key from her pocket and placed it gently on the desk. "I think it belongs here now," she whispered. William nodded. The key had done its job. It had opened more than a door. It had opened a life. He looked around the room one final time before switching off the light. As they stepped into the hallway, Nia slipped her hand into his. This time neither of them hesitated. The door closed softly behind them. But unlike before, it was not hiding secrets anymore. It was protecting memories. Ahead stretched a future neither of them had expected. A father, a daughter, a second chance. And for the first time in many years, the old manor no longer felt empty. It felt like home.